This is the Hidden Why podcast, episode 990. I'm speaking with Greg McKeown, and we're discussing his books, Essentialism and Effortless. Please enjoy. Greg, welcome to the Hidden Why podcast. So great to have you here today.
Lee, it's a pleasure. Cheers.
Mate, new book out, Effortless. Your first book, Essentialism. Absolutely loved it, and perhaps we can start there, because I think there may be a little bit of a crossover, huh?
Yes, I think that's right. Essentialism is about, in one word, is prioritization. You know, it's figuring out what's essential and eliminating everything that's not. Effortless in one word is simplification, and it's really how to make those essential things as easy or effortless as possible.
So it's sort of the stepping stone to Effortless from Essentialism. Yeah,
I think that's right. I mean, I think that they are standalone. And that became more obvious to me as I continued the research for Effortless. Who doesn't want their life to be a little more effortless today, a little easier tomorrow, especially the things that matter most to us. And so I've enjoyed watching people discover these ideas from that perspective as well. But I think they're a little bit like Paul McCartney and John Lennon. You know, it's like the music. They had music separately, but it was where they played together that the magic happened in the Beatles. So hopefully these two books sort of work together that's a bit of a presumptuous example, but otherwise, a good way.
Yeah, well, I thoroughly enjoyed Essentialism. I read it a few years back, I guess, when it was perhaps launched. And it was around the time of this sort of minimalism movement. It seemed to be a bit of a trend there. Is that about the time it sort of came? Yours was a bit before that, actually. I think before the minimalist movement.
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting because I didn't get to Essentialism through minimalism. I was working with Silicon Valley companies and just noticed a predictable pattern that in the early days, these ventures would find clarity, and that clarity would lead to success, and the success breeded options and opportunities, which all sounds like the right problem to have. But it did turn out to be a problem if it led to the undisciplined pursuit of more. And so I was really trying to understand the antidote to that problem,
right?
And essentialism was the antidote. That was the kind of leadership you needed to become successful at success. And so that was just my attempt to try and put a word on it. You know, the essentialist leaders are the kind that they remove the non-essentials. They get rid of even good options before they have to. And so it was actually quite intriguing to me to watch when the book came out. So many people saying, "Oh, well, this is part of minimalism," and it was like, "Oh, they're not wrong," but it just wasn't the journey that led to the naming of the phenomenon and what I was observing.
No, well, it's interesting, and I was going to ask you about what made you write the book, because often it's an internal pursuit, isn't it, to try and, like in this instance, for example, is become more organised and prioritised in life. But for you, it was an external observation that made you write the book, by the sounds of it.
Yeah, it started off as an observation in business, but it wasn't a business question I was trying to answer in Essentialism. It was a human question. So it was, in addition to watching this external thing, there was an internal experience that I had at the same time, and it was those combination experiences that made me go, yeah, I've got to get into this. And that experience was when I got an email from my manager at the time that said, "Look, Friday between 1 and 2 p.m. would be a very bad time for your wife to have a baby, because I need you to be at this client meeting." And maybe they was just joking around, but I still felt some pressure from it. And there I was Friday morning. We were in the hospital. Our daughter had just been born. And I'm feeling torn, how do I keep everyone happy? I've got my laptop open, my phone open, and I'm how can I do both? And to my shame, I did go to the client meeting. And even afterwards, I remember my manager saying, "Oh, the client will respect you for the choice you just made." And I'm not sure that...
Terrible. to think that they would respect you for that choice.
Yeah, I don't think the look on their faces did evince that sort of respect. But even if they had, it's obvious, and it was obvious in hindsight, that I'd made a fool's bargain. And what I learned was, if you don't prioritize your life, someone else will.
Yeah.
And that was sort of the birth of essentialism in on the personal realm.
Right.
And it was that combination of Silicon Valley companies plus the personal experience that together I said, okay, we've just got to understand this better. Why do we prioritize the way we do? Why do we violate what's essential for what's not essential? And it set me off on this journey that has been so impactful.
Yeah.
For me anyway.
No, I really, really love this topic, and I love the idea of it, because in my experience, but even looking around me, people are they're working hard, they're working longer hours, they're stretched too thin, and you look at what they do in their day and you sort of go, well, you're doing all these hours and this extra work, but is it actually producing any greater results? And is it producing greater results in the areas of life that matter? And I guess that's where I sort of came to a point where I was, even in my career, just adding things on, just always putting more things into the system without even reviewing it, reflecting on it, and understanding why it's there. And it didn't change the results, but I just become accustomed to doing it, and I became burnt out, stressed. So it's interesting that, and that's a very common in this day and age.
Yes, and that's something right there that I really tried to take a double click on with the new book, with Effortless, is I was observing that sometimes, even when people discovered essentialism, the way they would go about applying it was a bit counterproductive, where people would say, okay, well, I've got to try and essentialize everything, and they went at it in quite an extreme way. And I realized, well, it's not just essential versus not essential. That's a really important lens. I completely subscribe to that. But it's also just a certain approach to life. It's not just do the right thing. Are you doing it in the right way? Yeah, there's a lot of overachievers. Let's call it part of the hit squad. The hardworking, the hardworking, intelligent, talented group, HIT, right? That group that really, whatever they pick up, they think, well, I've got to do this 110%. I've got to put everything I possibly can into it, and it's a strategy that I believe in. Giving all you can and going big. Of course, giving a lot of effort, that makes sense. If you're not putting any effort in, put a lot of effort in. I mean, there's a lot to be said for that. But there's a point for a certain group of the population where they're already doing that. So if you just try to go even harder, you just end up being more burned out, not getting better results. And so in one sense, everything I'm writing about in Effortless is a bit dangerous if the wrong person reads it, so to speak.
Takes it the wrong way.
Yeah, if the people I'm writing it for, it's for these high achievers. It's really like timely message, because most people in the hit squad want 10x results, but none of them can work 10x harder.
Yeah.
And that's why you have to suddenly open yourself up to this and to say, well, look, easy isn't the same as lazy.
No.
Easy is something that doesn't require great effort. Lazy is I'm not willing to put in effort. Well, fine. I mean, if somebody's being lazy, fine. There's lots of books written for people in that category, let's say. But but for the people I'm writing for, this is so important to discover that there is a good and virtuous path that says, let's find a smarter, better, easier approach so that we can accomplish, the next level of contribution, but without burning out. And that group, I think, has grown over the last year and a half through the pandemic. There's a lot of people who know, I think, what I'm talking about right now. Yeah. They're already highly engaged, but they're on the edge of exhaustion.
Yeah.
You know, they're running faster than they ever have, but they're not getting closer to their goals. And so, if you just get that group in that one paradigm, well, harder work will get me better results. Actually, what it will do is it will wreck your marriage. It will wreck your relationships. It's going to wreck your chances of success. It's a strategy that can only go so far. But there is this alternative where you say, well, how can this be more? How can it be effortless? How can it be easier? What strategy might that look like? And this has an almost limitless potential, where effort has a certain point, a certain ceiling to what can be done.
Yeah, just sleep comes to mind for me, and this idea that was sort of trendy, I guess, and maybe still is, I don't know, but I'll sleep less, and then I can fit in more time and do that extra work. But we know that if you have, the right amount of sleep, whether that's 7 to 9 hours, whatever it is, you're actually going to be more productive. And it's probably aligned with what you're talking about here being effortless. It's not about working harder. It's about, I guess, working smarter.
Well, sleep specifically, if you're in the first mindset, if you're that sort of paradigm that just more is better, then your argument will look like 1 hour less sleep will equal 1 hour more productivity. And of course, I suppose for one day, for 1 hour, that seemed, that
maybe a week.
Right.
Yeah,
right. But it's not. You're just violating a deeper principle that will catch up with you, and you start to get to diminishing returns because you're so exhausted, and then you move to even negative returns. And one of the complications with this is one of the more interesting pieces of research that I came across in writing Effortless was that as people approach burnout, they're the last ones to know about it. So because the nature of sleep deprivation, for example, is that your brain gets foggy, you're not able to see so clearly in your decision making, and that includes your self-awareness. Right. So that the more tired people become, the less likely they are to know about it. And to the extent that I almost feel this now, which is that there's sort of two types of people in the world right now. There are people who are burned out, and then there are people who know they are burned out. And so you sort of, it's an accomplishment almost to get into the second category, where you just know it and admit it, and then start to say, okay, well then,
how can I fix this?
Yeah, and I'm not going to try and fix it by working even longer hours and pushing even more. I'm going to actually find a way that says, well, how do I create some boundaries? How do I make sure I do get rest? Maybe I take a nap every day. Naps can produce as much learning improvement, like acceleration in mental ability, as a whole night of sleep under some circumstances. There's incredibly elite, helpful use of time for high performers, and yet people in this sort of old way of thinking would imagine exactly the opposite. Oh, well, taking a nap, that's just for kids, that's sort of lazy. It's like, no, actually the elite performers across industries are the ones who are actually getting that nap in. Top performers, according to Anders Ericsson's study, sleep on average 8.5 hours over every 24-hour period. I think it's 8.4 is what he found. And that meant they didn't just sleep more at night, they actually took more naps as well. So it wasn't just that top performers spent more hours focused on a particular task, which they did. They were also more rested when they were doing it. So they were getting more out of the focused energy they were putting in. So top performers simply do sleep more. They do rest more. Yeah. The evidence is very strong for that. It's just that there's this old mindset. I always think about it like bloodletting. The medical industry for the longest time believed bloodletting was good for the patient. Actually, most of the time it was killing them, as they kept on doing it because the paradigm was so strong. Similarly now for this kind of, no pain, no gain, exhaustion type approach, it doesn't work. It is not actually what high performers do. It isn't. but the paradigm lives on for quite a while past its usefulness. We have to educate ourselves out of it and break through, not just to get the knowledge already exists, but to get it broad enough that it becomes the cultural norm, and we stop telling these heroic stories that are actually counterproductive for what high performers really do.
Yeah, and that whole sleep piece and high performance, because I know if I'm lacking sleep, I make poorer choices, in work and personal life.
Well, that's exactly what happens, is that it attacks our discernment. And so we need to protect the asset. In a sense, it's our highest priority is to protect the asset ourselves, because we're the only vehicle through which we can make any other contribution. And we're also the only vehicle through which we can make any decisions. And so protecting our ability to prioritize is our highest priority. And it's of course it's not selfish. It's just simple wisdom. It's common sense, really. But in a culture that celebrates sometimes 24/7 grind, hustle culture, that's beyond work is good. That's saying if you're not exhausted, you're not doing enough. Take for example, somebody I was coaching. She's a manager at a university, and she's the kind of person who's up till 4 a.m. photoshopping for her youth group at church the next day. Why? Because she believes that if she's not absolutely on the edge of burnout, she must not be doing enough. She's the kind of person who, if she isn't eating lunch, feels guilty. And so I gave her a challenge. I said, look, you've got to invert this, because it doesn't matter how much you believe it. It doesn't make it true. It doesn't mean your performance will be better for this kind of approach. That's an old paradigm. You're bloodletting, right? So let's invert. And the fastest way to invert is to ask a different question. And the question I gave to her, the simple intervention is just the next time someone asks you to do something, you just say, okay, how can I make this easy? Instead of how can I do everything I can possibly do to amaze them and wow them, right? Like, just how can I make this easy? And so she gets a call from the university professor, and who says, look, I'd like you to get your videography team to come and, to video my class for the semester. Well, she almost jumped, into the old mindset. We could get a whole team there. We could have multiple cameras, different angles. We'll edit it all together, have music, graphics, intros, outros, slides. I mean, she's just ready to do all that because she knows that modality of execution. But in the end, she pauses. She says, okay, hold on. Is there an easy way to do this? What's the easiest solution? And as she's exploring that with the professor, it turns out it's for one student who's going to miss a few sessions because of an athletic commitment, but still needs the class to graduate. And they come up with a solution together that, well, what if you just had another student record it on an iPhone and send those, that session to him whenever he misses. The professor hadn't thought about that because he was overcomplicating too, but he's delighted with that outcome. And so within 10 minutes of it's a 10-minute phone call, he's happy, and she's saved 4 months for an entire team that she's responsible for.
Bloody hell.
For the sake of a single question. But that's the thing. Yeah. There's a lot like that going on. I know that's like N equals 1. It's one story. But actually there's more of that available to people than is obvious. And so if they can just invert by asking that question, it can reveal surprising answers.
And I think that's the key to most of it, isn't it? Just that time to pause and ask questions and reflect. And we don't, well, definitely now we just don't give ourselves that chance. And you look at technology, yes, it's helped us in many ways, but I see it constantly now because I'm quite aware of it myself. So I guess I see other people doing it. As soon as there's a ping, it makes people jump. And I saw it yesterday, and I don't want to throw my wife under the bus, but she was walking towards the bedroom to maybe brush her teeth or something, and a ping went off. Now, I keep my phone on silent so I don't get distracted. And I saw her, as soon as that ping went off, she turned around straight away and almost went faster back to her phone, like it was in a state of emergency. And just that sort of culture is inbred in us now. It's definitely a part of it. But that's the new sort of culture that's been built. And now I look at the old culture, the guilt part. You know, I look at myself when I suddenly have a little bit of time and I maybe finish at 3 o'clock instead of working until 7, and I feel guilty. Oh, I should be working. You know, what am I doing? How can I get away with this? And that's a part of me that I don't know where. It's obviously cultural that's come through, and it's really hard to invert.
Yeah, well, I think it's. I mean, there's a few places to go with that, but if you're at a restaurant and you hear that ping, everybody in the restaurant turns to their phones. Oh, is that mine? Oh, I gotta, you know. I mean, yes, we're like Pavlov's dogs. We've absolutely been trained. You know, this could be essential. This could be vital. This could be, you know, and most of the time it's not. But we never know when it is or when it isn't, and so you feel very chained. I've made a point, you know, recently, because I found myself getting into that feeling, just to leave the phone. You know, like, you don't have to have the phone. Go to lunch without it. Just give your phone a break for a little while. Vacation. How many times do you have people on vacations still with their phones, still locked in, still responding? Oh, I'm going to be gone for 2 days, and then if you send them an email or something, and suddenly they respond within 2 minutes. You know, that there is some pool somewhere. They're supposed to be unplugged, but they're just still locked in. They're still connected, and it does feel like, to me at least, that the whatever boundaries used to exist have just slowly been eaten away. It's sort of a corporatism has taken over more and more of our life, a sort of corporate set of values and cultures. And it hasn't got, like, I don't even particularly like the phrase work-life balance, because it's like, how rare is it that it's like, oh yeah, too much life going on, not enough work. Like, that's not, so to call it a balance doesn't feel like it names the real problem. It's just like having a boundary. It means, what we mean is having a life. It's being able to leave it, being able to stop. And before the pandemic, generally there was a commute that divided work from home. There was a physicality of location.
Yeah, true.
But after the pandemic, that final sort of thread of separation was gone, and the corporate life moved more and more into our lives. And so people, you know, literally Zoom, eat, sleep, repeat type lifestyle. And it gets to the end of the day, and they, you know, well, what is the end? It's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It keeps going. There's no natural end. People don't even know what day it is. Look at the Fitbit where they're going to bed. It's 300 steps. They haven't moved. I mean, this is a certain lifestyle, and strangely one that could have been so different. I mean, somebody once said to me, they said, oh, I used to say, if I have work from home, I'll take a nap every day. And it'd been a year and 4 months into the pandemic at this time. He said, I've worked from home that entire time. I've not taken one nap. You know, but he has it. He can do it. So what's going on? And it's this. So you have to, in this environment, in our current culture, you have to build boundaries, or there won't be any.
Yeah.
So I recommend people have, for example, a done for the day list, where you say, okay, it's not an endless to-do list. Most overachievers, you know, they've got the to-do lists are longer by the end of the day than they are at the beginning. And that will be true almost every day that they live. So that can't be the right mechanism for ordering our lives. It's fine to have a long list, add to it all you want, but have a separate list, which is, when I've done these things, I am done for today. There are a few essential things. I'm going to get them done. When they're done, you know, we get to say, no more sneaky work after this. You know, the work is done. So I think a done for the day list helps as a boundary, a time to be done for the day. You know, I chose 5 p.m. for that through the pandemic, and I would say 80 to 90% of the time I've kept to that. And the way I've done that is I had a fun accountability thing. I was like a town crier. Walk out of the room and I would yell out to everyone, it's 5 o'clock, you know, whatever time it was. You don't want to yell out, it's 5:23 if everyone knows it's 5 o'clock, that your time is done. And that helped me to go, okay, well, you have to prioritize differently. You can't just say, well, 1 hour less sleep. You can't say 1 hour less time with the family, 1 hour less time of rest and relaxation. You've got to actually prioritize what you do through the day, because you've got a boundary at the end. And these are also vital, because actually these are the mechanisms for making a higher contribution. Is that it's like a slingshot. You end, you rest. We're rhythmic beings, we're biological creatures. We need to have these cycles for top performance. So it's not like I've looked back at the last year and a half and gone, well, I kind of had to sacrifice on work there to have that boundary. It's been the opposite. It's been by far the most productive I've been in my adult life, because there's just clear boundaries and more rest than under the previous system.
And I suppose once you start implementing those boundaries, I mean, it all sort of rolls around in itself. Like if you set a boundary at 5 o'clock and you set yourself a list, your list never ends. I've got a big list right next to me right now. And I know the few things on there that are important to me, that if I get done, great. I know the things that will probably be on the list tomorrow. And if they're on the list in a week, I'm probably going to go, well, they're not really that essential, are they? Because I haven't actually bothered to do them. So maybe I can cross them off. And if you set a boundary at 5 o'clock, you're going to start doing those really important things that matter, that are essential. And those other things that aren't essential, you'd be going, you know what? It hasn't actually affected my performance. I'm actually performing better without doing them.
Yeah, I mean, it's we need boundaries to be able to, we have to. What boundaries do is admit that there are trade-offs. That you can't just do everything for everyone all of the time and expect that to be. Expect that to lead to peak performance. Yeah. If but by setting sensible limits, that's really, to me, the key to becoming relatively limitless. And I don't, I'm not beholden to the cultural stories that say otherwise. I'm going with the data. And the data is not ambiguous about this. The data is really clear. You've got to focus. You can only do a few things superbly well. Academic work, for example, like writing a book. You can't do 7, 8, 10 hours a day at optimal level. Pretty much, if you're doing concentrated deep work, you sort of 2 or 3 hours max. Yeah. If you push beyond that, which you can, and I've done before, you start reaching diminishing returns. So for each extra hour you put in, you're getting less back. But it gets worse than that, because if you go far enough, you get to negative returns where, the manuscript I'm working on is worse for every extra hour I put in. I'm making the whole thing worse. But what's strange is in the moment you think, oh, this is so good. I've got this new idea. Oh, let me just redo all these. Oh, let's change the whole structure of the book. Oh, let's do the whole. And you start undoing really good work because your discernment is that low. And so it's like one of the most important principles for achieving breakthrough, sustainable success is to have an upper bound to your work each day, so that you say, even though you feel like doing 10 hours because you're so excited day one, you say, okay, no, I'm writing top 3 hours, it's over. Yeah, leave it, move on. So that the next day you say, okay, I've still got some energy to be able to work on it again. And then day 3 or 4, you don't really feel like it. You've got other things you could do, but you say, wow, it's not so much. I can do this. And so it's always having an upper or lower bound. Maybe writing a book's a bit of a grandiose example. Everybody wants to do that. But like, I know a lot of people want to write a journal, and they make the same mistake. They say, okay, well, I'm going to write. They write 3 pages day one. It takes them an hour, and they don't have an hour in their schedule day 2. So by day 3, they're like trying to make up for day 2. They've got to try and come up with 2 hours, and they just don't have it. And so before they've begun, it's over.
I give up.
And the breakthrough for me with journal keeping was when I said, okay, I need an upper and lower bound. A lower bound was 1 sentence a day, right? It's tiny, it's doable. You can do it in 60 seconds if you need to. Yeah. Upper bound was the real breakthrough, though. It was saying no more than 5 sentences a day. And when I put the upper bound in place, it meant that, of course, I could do 5 sentences too. And day 1, day 2, of course, I feel like writing more. But that's what you want. You want to be able to be, you want to be done with something still in the tank. And I started that 10 and a half years ago. I'm pretty sure I haven't missed a day since then now.
It's pretty good going.
And I don't see that changing, so... we'll talk again in 15 years, 20 years. I think it will just carry on. It's built in now. But I think this is, a lot of people, the curse of performance is intermittent activity. You go big for a moment. It's like boom and bust. You go big and then you give up for a long time. Then you go big and you give up. And so it's so counter actual, what top performers do. They're achieving within a certain range, and that upper bound, however counterintuitive that is necessary to be able to sustain and continue performance for the very long run.
Yeah, it's that long-termism versus short-termism, isn't it? The focus there.
I think so.
One really good point, out of this, I'm just listening to you speak, is that internal awareness. And I'm going back to the ping or the phone ringing while you're on holidays and you're picking it up. And I make a lot of calls in my industry. And I get people constantly picking up the phone going, hang on, I'm at work. And I'm just like, well, you picked up the phone. Oh, hang on, I'm on holidays. Well, you picked up the phone. And I just think there's this internal level of missing out on something. They feel like they don't do it, they're going to miss out on something. And that's, for me, a very strong signal of a lack of internal awareness and self-appreciation for what you do, and a life that is without boundaries.
I started a podcast a year ago called the What's Essential podcast, and one of the people I had on was Patrick McGinnis. He's the person who coined the phrase FOMO, fear of missing out.
Okay.
So he's got some good bragging rights there because he came up with a word that now is in the dictionary, and that's what I think you're talking about there is this FOMO that we're operating out of fear or sometimes out of greed, but just this fear of something else is going on and I'm going to miss something, and this I think is an illustration of how technology makes for a good servant but a poor master. You want to be, technology has a great place. It can be a tremendous tool, including which I think has a mixed record, but including social media. I think it has a powerful part that it can play. And I think it does play that part for about 1% of the population who uses it to create, to do something, to extend what they're trying to accomplish. But then there's sort of the masses of people who are just on there, kind of mindlessly going through. Maybe they're engaging, and then the rest of people who are just silently observing. And it's like these are not all equal uses. We got to make sure that whatever time we're spending in technology, it's in pursuit of something that's essential, not just something that's using us.
And it's not just the technology, even going back to your point before of setting those boundaries and knowing when, we've done what's essential and what's not essential, we can leave. But, even me, I can sort of think about some examples where I've sort of said, no, I need to do this, because a part of me thinks if I don't do that, I'm going to miss out on something. I'm going to miss out on that next opportunity, that next business, relationship, whatever it might be. And it's the same principles behind that. I feel like I'm going to miss out on something, and perhaps I'm not internally connected enough to understand what's essential then and what's not.
Well, it's certainly something that we need to pay attention to. I just was chatting with the author of a new book called Wanting, and he was talking about mimetic desire, which is that as humans, it's such a clever point he makes. He said that for many of us, because mimetic is just observational, right? That we are mimicking what other people do, and because we are inherently mimetic as humans, what happens is that sometimes we want things just because we believe other people want things.
Yeah.
it's not even that they have them and we want them. It's like we just think, we believe, well, if I have this, that will be great because I think that's what everybody else wants. Instead of, like, really, do I want this? Is this important? And being able to take a moment to get clearer, to know really, how I'd say it this way, what voice I'm listening to. Am I listening to this, fear of missing out? It's like a scared voice. Versus a friend of mine says we need to listen to the sacred voice, not the scared voice. And I like that.
Yeah.
The similarity of those words, and to be able to just get quiet, every so often, maybe every day, just taking a few minutes. I didn't do it today, and I can feel the difference all day. But most days, I'll get up and sort of do journal and read in wisdom literature and scripture, and even take a moment, meditate, pray.
Yeah.
And I can feel the difference all day long when I do that. And it's a painting in my office, my favorite painting. It's called The Listener.
Yeah.
And it's an image of a person he's got his eyes closed because you can't show listening in a portrait, but his eyes closed to show he's listening, and he's got all these voices around him, all these people. He's got family members and people in history and all this noise around him. And the idea is that he's trying to get in touch with that, that quieter voice inside that somehow seems to know what really matters. And Steve Jobs talked about it too. That if you listen to that intuition, or whatever the word is we want to call it, it seems to know. And it's that sort of seeming to know, rather than just guessing about what other people seem to want, or rushing around because everyone else is rushing around, that helps us discover a different path, a different way to do life that isn't so fear-driven, that isn't so anxious, that isn't pulled in so many different directions. It's a calmer impulse. And it makes, to my estimation anyway, it's the most important thing in all of life, literally. Yeah. For Anna and I, our goal with our children, literally our written goal is to help them to feel, recognize, and follow that voice of conscience. Yeah. Because what we believe is that, they're all teenagers now, but we started this when they were very young. We basically believe that once that happens, the fundamental job of parenting is done. It's,
be self-guided.
That's the job. That's right, and guided by something better than whatever happens to be popular, or something better than what is just the normal culture around them. That they have something internal to be led by, and whether it's teenagers or whether it's adults, I think it's still the same thing to keep coming back to.
And I think that's, for me, I guess where this all starts, essentialism, perhaps effortless as well, but from that grounding, that internal grounding and self-awareness. Is that where you help people start with essentialism? Because I don't see essentialism as a hack, or a life hack or anything like that. I think it's more of a philosophy, a way to live life. And I think that means, any way to live life is a life that's very self-aware.
Yes, I think that is the place to begin, is really in a kind of what I would call deep listening. That at first I think you have to do it yourself. You have to develop deep listening within yourself so that you can discern the difference between these voices. It's a practice. It's not something you do once and then you've got it down. It's just you keep coming back to it. But then it evolves even from there, where you start to say, well, what if I could learn to listen to other people around me in order to help them hear that voice within themselves, instead of me being another loud voice telling them what to do and telling them how to do it and when to do it and so on, that your job is to create space for them and safety for them, and to listen to them so deeply that they can feel safe to hear their sacred voice and not to be just bossed around by you either. It's to me, it is this a golden thread running through Essentialism and now Effortless, and into working on a new book and into the new work as well. It's like this is really the core. In fact, I ended Effortless with a personal story that goes to the heart of what you're asking. It was when one of my daughters became suddenly very ill indeed with what turned out to be a neurological disease. She went from the picture of health, full of light and animation, of humor and energy. She's on a rock climbing team, and she's funny and she's engaging and all of that, everything you'd want. And then she just started going slower and slower and slower to the point that she could barely write her own name. It took her fully 2 minutes, like 120 seconds to write her own name. It's exceedingly slow. She became more and more comatose to the point that she was going to fall into a coma and die without intervention. And yet no neurologist that we spoke with, and we spoke with more than one, of course, could give us even the beginning of what was going on. They just shrugged their shoulders at us. Yeah. And so this is the stuff that agony can be made of. And it was this sort of moment where I discovered more clearly than anything else in my life that there are two paths in life. One is the heavier, harder path where you're trying to control everything and do everything that you possibly could ever think of, or anyone's recommending you do to try and help our daughter. Or you get quiet and you get rid of that anxiety. You get out of the scared self and into the sacred self, and you start to feel and be guided into what can actually help. And we found singing together and laughing together and playing together was necessary to put off this anxiety and all of that fear, and suddenly be able to feel, okay, this is the next step. This is what we do next. This is the one next right step, and let's go for it. And that was key to her eventual diagnosis and wow. Treatment. It's a 2.5 year journey. As of now, she's doing really, really well again. But at a very key moment before we had any success, I remember what else can I call it but like a part of the sacred voice, but something said to me. It was probably the worst moment of the whole thing for me. It's just there's no answers and I'm just losing her. Well, I've lost her. Her personality's gone and no one can tell you anything about why. And the feeling that came to me in the midst of that, as I was going through that kind of meditative, prayerful state, was she will find what is lost. And that's the name of my, I guess my second favorite painting, I suppose. Now it's a beautiful painting and we have it in our home already. But that phrase, of course, took on new meaning, and that calmed us down and it gave us something to trust in, instead of all the noise around us that would have distracted us and could have, I think, demoralized us, depressed us, almost destroyed us. Could have imagined it destroying marriage, family, culture, everything.
For sure.
And then of course, being in, that's not the state to be able to help your daughter, right? So it all becomes a downward spiral. But instead, that assurance and sense helped us to remain positive and hopeful and grateful. And that in turn helped us to discern the right paths that ended up helping her, actually find what was lost. And so, yeah, I do think that that's the commonality, is to be able to learn to listen ourselves, and then to learn to listen to others, so that to the level that they can listen to that voice themselves. There's not a lot of that in today's modern world.
No, not at all. And I think that's just a great way to wrap it up. I think that's a great way to, start this inner journey that will lead to a life that's more essential and more fulfilling and hopefully happy as well.
Yeah.
I will stick the links in the show notes, guys, listening out there, to the books, so you can pick up the books and have a read and get a bit more involved in this topic of conversation. I do have a few questions for you now, if you've got a couple of minutes, Greg.
Yeah, let's do it.
I know you've talked about routines and rituals that you have already, but is there one particular routine that you do daily that really helps contribute to your success?
I think one of the I would say that morning routine, on the days I do it, which is most days, of getting really deep so that you can feel almost a revelatory force in your life, rather than a reactive force. So before you're getting into email and living out of your inbox, that time is so cumulative in its force. So I think that still is what I would say the essential habit.
Yeah, nice. How do you define success?
I mean, I think that success is doing what I came here to do. So it's with the deepest convictions of my life that life is a mission, not a career, that life has purpose independent of my choosing. And my job is to detect that and to pursue it and to achieve it. To me, that is success. If you did everything else in life and you didn't achieve that, I think that would not be success.
Yeah, I like that. What advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
I've thought actually quite a lot about that question, and I would just say it all works out and better than you think. And what's powerful to me about it is that it really literally is the same advice I really do need today. And it's like just every day. It's just things will work out better than you think. And I think that's worth holding on to for the rest of us.
Coming from that sacred place rather than scared place again, isn't it?
That's what it is.
Do you have one tool, skill, or resource that you use to help improve your overall productivity?
I mean, I would say that particularly in the pandemic, I started a habit that we now have carried on even as the pandemic is easing here in the US, and that's going for a walk with my wife. We don't do it now every day, but there was a time we were doing it almost every day, and we did it this morning. And any day I miss that, I miss it because it's just so helpful to get aligned and so helpful to be able to, some days when we first did it, to be honest, it wasn't very easy. It wasn't even very fun some days because what are we doing here? Are we problem solving together? Are we things can get quite emotional. It wasn't like a piece of cake at first. But as we carried on and it found its own norms, its own ways of being, it became what I was describing before, a chance that typically one or the other of us will end up sharing more on a particular day. But it's a chance to be heard. So not just so that you feel validated, which there's nothing wrong with that, but it's beyond validation to the point that you start to go, I think this is the right next thing. I think this is the right path that we should be on. This surprises me, but I think this is what it is. And slowly it's allowed us to get more and more aligned, to go from sometimes feeling quite lost in life to feeling like, this is the right path. This is what we're supposed to be doing. And I don't think that there's anything better than that. So to me, maybe it's not the kind of tool you'd normally have people answer, but it is the kind of tool that it is still its own kind of tool and practice.
I like it. I've just started walking at night, and I really am enjoying it so far.
Yeah.
If you were to be served your last meal, what would you request?
Fish and chips.
Yeah, nice.
Proper fish and chips.
Proper.
Not California style. I'll tell you that right now.
What activity gives you the greatest sense of joy?
I would say. I was going to say. There's a few answers that are rolling around for me. I think when I'm in service of my children, when I'm really just present for them. And it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to. I mean, sometimes I'll take a child with me whenever I travel. So about 80% of the time, I'll have one of my children with me, and I love that. We have great experiences. But I mean, going and playing on the foosball table with my son, and then that this was happened a couple of days ago, and then we were chatting, and then we got sat down and we had a chat for like an hour, and he's a teenager now, and so that's pretty precious stuff to really just be able to talk and listen and even counsel together. And we got to talk about things that were really important. Like it needed to be he and I talking about it. It was important. when I come to write my journal at the end of the day and think about what I'm grateful for, that's the stuff that counts. And especially if you go back and read journals over like a year, 10 years before, man, loads of the stuff that you were grateful for on the day doesn't even matter anymore. But those kinds of moments stand out, and you go, yeah, that really matters. That's like 10 times more important than the other entries on the day.
That's a moment, yeah. Do you have a particular book that you'd pass down to your children, other than your own, of course?
No, I wouldn't put Essentialism and Effortless on there. Like, if they could read absolutely anything. I've thought about lots of. My children read a lot now. My eldest, who just go off to university, I said, you should write down all the books you've read, in your teenager years. And she did, and she stopped when she got to 200. And it's a lot more than I'd read at the time. And, at that age. And so there's a lot to choose from now. I'm like staring at my library right now. I know I'm being too. I'm not. I should. You're asking for like a rapid fire, and I'm making it the opposite of that.
These are very hard questions. As I ask them, and I often reflect and go, "Geez, could I answer that question myself?" And often, no. The answer would be without thinking about it. But
there's a really beautiful book that maybe people haven't heard, but it's by Stephen Covey. It's called The Divine Center. That's a really powerful book. That's one that I would recommend. That was sort of the deeper thinking that he did. 7 Habits was what he was famous for, but The Divine Center is what he felt was his most important work. That's something that I stare up here and I think, if I could just give one of these books, that would be among them.
So what's that title again?
It's called The Divine Center.
Okay.
And it's an unapologetically religious book. It's a Christian book, so people know what they're getting. Another book I stare up here is a book called Bonds That Make Us Free, by Terry C. Warner. That's quite a thick read, quite a heavy read, but you won't come away unchanged. You were changed if you read that book. I certainly was. About removing all this mental clutter that makes relationships so difficult. We get trapped. We get trapped in these relationship cycles where we think that either they are the problem, the other person's a problem, or I'm the problem. He calls it like the I'm a monster, they're a monster problem. And the discovery is that there is no monster. That's the breakthrough. Is you go, no. But there's a certain cycle. I haven't talked about this for years, but the cycle is basically that we feel bad, or we something happens, or we act maybe out of conscience. We violate conscience in some way, and in that moment, 2 monsters are born. We are a monster, they are a monster. And we then get trapped for the longest time. We're pointing fingers. Well, it must be them. I feel miserable. It must be them. And of course, as soon as you start pointing a finger like that, you're trapped because you say, well, what if they're not a monster? What kind of a monster would point at someone else and say they are a monster? So maybe I'm the monster. And so both monsters are created in the same moment of conscience violation. And so it's the truth will set you free type of message. It's that you suddenly discover, okay, well, I made this mistake. It's a small thing. We admit it. I've held on to this grudge. I've done this thing. And as soon as we accept that, we're like liberated that moment. Our relationship's completely transformed by following that, and not even having to talk about it with them. It's just different. The second from the moment that I made the discovery, it was like, oh, okay, I don't need to accuse anyone anymore. And I don't have to feel self-accusing and shame either. This is okay, move forward.
Yeah. No, I like that. A couple of strong recommendations there anyway, Greg. I appreciate it. How can people best reach out to you, Greg? Where can they find you?
If people find this sort of thing good and interesting, they should sign up for the newsletter at gregmckeown.com. I write a 1 Minute Wednesday, which is a very short thing that helps to try and keep us on track and in the right way, oriented in the world towards what matters most. And if they want to go beyond that, they could go to essentialism.com. Where there's a 21-day challenge people can take, small micro adjustments they can make to try and make the essential things more effortless in their lives. I think those are two places to begin. Good places.
I'll stick those in the show notes for everyone out there, mate. Really enjoyed this conversation today. Thank you.
Lee, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Guys out there, check it out, thehiddenwhy.com. All the show notes links will be in there, so have a look there and reach out to Greg and make sure you pick up a book. Effortless, a great read. Thanks, Greg. Thanks for listening, everyone. Thanks, guys, for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed what you heard. I hope you love what you're hearing. If you like this episode, guys, or any of the episodes that you're listening to here at The Hidden Why, please do me a favor by sharing it. You can share it with your families. You can share it with your loved ones. You can do that by using your favorite social media channels, using the icons on the platform that you're listening to The Hidden Why podcast. Also, guys, if you're a fan of the show, please connect with me. Connect with me at thehiddenwhy.com. I love to hear from you. I love to converse with the people that listen to this show to find out what they enjoy, what they don't enjoy, and perhaps if they have any questions or feedback for the show as well. You can stay up to date with all that I'm releasing here, guys. I do a solo show every Monday, a 3-minute thought every Thursday. I do 2 interviews a week on Wednesday and a Saturday, and a book review every Friday. You can stay up to date with all that by subscribing to my newsletter at thehiddenwhy.com. Just enter your email address there, and also subscribing to the podcast on the platform that you choose to listen to your podcasts. You can also support the show, guys, by using the Amazon links at thehiddenwhy.com. So if you like books, you can get all the books that I review there, and anything else really that you like to purchase through Amazon. So use that link, it helps support the show. And we've also got a deal with Audible, guys. Audible is a fantastic way to listen to all your favorite books. We've got a deal with them so you can get 2 free books when you subscribe subscribe to a 30-day free trial. So check that out again at thehiddenwhy.com. Guys, that's it from me. You know what to do. Go out there, breathe more passion into every single moment. Do everything with greater purpose, and in doing so you will discover your hidden why. This is The Hidden Why. My name is Lee Martinuzzi. Until next time, peace, passion and purpose. See you soon.